Welcome to the Exam Study Expert Podcast, helping you ace your exams at school and university through the psychology of high performance and the science of studying smarter, not harder. It's my pleasure to introduce your host, the Cambridge-trained memory psychologist and exam success coach, William Wadsworth.
Hello and welcome to the Exam Study Experts podcast and to a fresh instalment of our ever-popular Student Stories series, in which we turn the show over to a real-life student to help us bring to life the principles that this show teaches. How does it all fit together in practice? What are some of the practical considerations when you want to apply the ideas we talk about on the podcast? Hers is a story of success in an extremely competitive exam process, but not success on first time of asking. She attempted the exam several times, gradually applying different ideas and gradually levelling up her study strategy. I helped her out with the final and successful attempt, by which time, by the time I met her, she had already mastered a lot of the fundamentals of studying well and was starting to ask some really quite sophisticated questions about the finer points of a really high-performance study system. There are so many lessons from the various stages of her story, from perseverance and resilience, growth mindset, applying retrieval practice, and overcoming some of the challenges to applying retrieval practice really well. And above all, I think the one lesson I would want everyone to draw from this is what Sana Murray does so brilliantly throughout her whole academic career, is constantly identifying what she needs to work on and then seeking out the right solutions to achieve her goals, whether that's on the mindset side or the more practical learning and memory strategy side. So I wanted to bring her on today, partly to inspire you to keep going, even if you're not getting the results you want initially, and also to unpack some of the key lessons she's learned along the way, because I think there's so much we can all learn from what she's done. Let's welcome her to the show and dive in.
Hi, my name is Sanna-Mari and I'm studying law in Finland.
A very warm welcome to the show. Firstly, huge congratulations on your recent results. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling very happy. I don't think anyone can understand how happy I'm feeling at this moment. I'm very glad.
Tell us a little bit about the road that led to your recent exam.
I tried to get into law school 5 years. So I decided to test 5 times. And it's a pretty difficult test and there is thousands of attendance. First 2 years, I didn't quite know how to broke the code of the test, and I failed 2 times. I got pretty low score, and I didn't really know how to read for it. The third year, the Spotify recommended this exam study expert podcast for me, and I was like, okay, sounds reasonable, and I started to listen to it, and now I'm here. I got in.
Fantastic. Well, look, we'll explore a little bit more about some of the things that made the difference in the end, because I think that's really interesting. Before we get to that, though, paint a little bit of a picture of what you're like as a student or as a scholar. Did sort of success academically come naturally?
Yes, and I was always a good student. I never was a straight A student. I always wanted to be, but I didn't know the way to be, and I didn't know the technique to be. Then I got to a really good high school. All the students there they have better grades than me. And I kind of felt like, okay, I'm in a good school now. I have to work hard. And I did work hard. And the high school lasted for 3 years. And the last year when we have final test, I had burnout, pretty bad burnout. And I didn't go to school and I honestly didn't care anymore. Of course, I wanted to be a good student. I wanted good grades, but I was so tired. I couldn't do anything anymore. And I went to talk to the school psychologist, and he introduced me to Carol Dweck and her idea of mindset. It changed the way I thought about studying and the way I thought about talent, because I wasn't never able to be the straight A student. I was always a good student, but never the best. And I always thought that maybe the best students have this kind of talent or some kind of sort of magical capability that they can do it. And when I read the Carol Dweck book, and I realized, okay, it's not that way. It's the way they study. Of course, they are probably talented, but there is so much more, and almost anything is possible if you just find the way. The best students, they probably have some good study strategies and techniques that I don't know of, and that's why I don't get the best grades. That's probably the reason. And because of this burnout, the first attempt to law school went like very badly. I wasn't able to read at all. I remember I read one book and I slept for 2 hours and went to the test, and it was horrible. And the next year it was the coronavirus, and they changed the test. The test was like, it was very fast. Like, you have 5 minutes to answer 5 questions. I couldn't be so fast. It was a total surprise, and they didn't tell what the test is going to be like. And I felt I wanted to try to attempt again. And then I was introduced to your podcast. I remember listening to it and I was like, okay, it sounds good. I could try it. I like it because it had this concretic way and advice, like what you should do. It didn't just have like, have a good attitude and read more and read well and work smart. It had this concretic advice.
Concrete advice, yeah. So how did you get on putting the advice into action? Talk us through the sort of main changes you made and what happened as a result.
First time, honestly, when I tried the retrieval practice, I was like, okay, this is so hard and this is waste of time. It felt like it. But I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a try, because I didn't have much anything else, because I have failed the first 2 times. And, like, I didn't have any strategy, because I knew that the last strategy didn't work and I needed a new one. And I tried it, and I remember, okay, like, I don't know about this. And next morning I woke up. I was like, okay, I'm going to do the retrieval practice with the things I did retrieval practice yesterday. And I know it all. And I was like, it's amazing. I cannot believe it. I know all of these, and I have never been able to remember such a hard things. It felt amazing. And I was like, okay, maybe this has some potential. And then the test came and the reading time, a month. And I used the retrieval practice and space practice, but I didn't read quite enough. And I have the technique, but I didn't have a strategy. But when the results came, for the first time, I passed the multiple section. I have to see it by myself to believe it really works.
Yeah, definitely encouraging signs.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for anyone that perhaps isn't using so much retrieval practice at the moment, or maybe they've kind of been aware of it, it's sort of an idea floating around, but they haven't kind of made the leap to practicing it consistently yet? Do you have any advice for anyone in that sort of situation?
I would like to say that you just kind of have to believe it works, and you will see the results yourself and in a few days. And it's hard and it's very frustrating at the start. I remember when I was reading this year to the test, and I said to you that I get very annoyed when I don't know the answer and I'm not sure of it. And it feels like, there is reading and then there is testing, and you're wasting time by testing, and it's kind of away from the time you're reading. And then you say to me, like, it's learning process. And if you go through the questions and you test yourself, you recall it, you're probably going to memorize some of it at least. And it kind of was the break it moment for me, because I was like, Yeah, it's not waste of time. It's not just unnecessary testing. It's learning. And it's very easy to forget it, that it's it's a learning process. It's not testing, it's testing. It's you're learning all the time when you're doing it, even if you don't remember anything of it. When you watch it and you have tried to recall it, you're going to remember it tomorrow.
Yeah. Even once you sort of start doing the retrieval, it can be tempting to put off doing the testing. You know, I'll see this quite a bit where people will show me big piles of flashcards or huge numbers of cards they've made in Anki or Quizlet or some digital system. And, you know, I'll say, well, you know, how many times have you tested yourself on these? And you know, sometimes the answer will be, well, I haven't started that yet. I want to make them all first before I start testing them. And the point you're making here is a really important one for people to note. Like, the testing is the learning. Like, everything else is just the preparatory exercise that gets you to the testing. Like, the testing is the most important bit. Like, don't leave that. Don't put that off till later. That's the bit we need to prioritize getting in and doing, you know, as soon as possible. So I think that's a really important point. I think for me, one of the interesting meta lessons about your story is you have that openness to advice at the different stages when you needed it. You know, you going and seeing your psychologist at school and taking on board the lessons from Carol Dweck. I think that seems like it really sort of set the foundations for you finding the podcast and applying the retrieval practice techniques and getting the big improvement. You weren't quite over the line yet with the results you wanted, but you know, big improvements and passing multiple sections for the first time, and then, you know, taking it another level still and getting in touch and us being able to do a little bit of work together to try and optimize what you were doing. And you've already given a couple of examples of what that looked like in practice. As you reflect on some of the other changes you implemented, were there any other kind of big things that you think really helped you level up and get the result you were looking for?
I think perhaps the main thing is that the fourth attempt last year that I cut out by 2 points, I didn't get in. I made these flashcards, and I did from all the topics I made the flashcards, and I spent the 2 first weeks just to make flashcards. I did go through them, but after 2 weeks, I started all over again. And of course, it leads to this situation that in the last week, you had this huge panic because you have so much flashcards to still go through, and you just don't have the time. And, you know, when you panic, you can't do anything. And this time, I remember when I talked to you and I asked, like, how should I schedule it? How should I do it? And you were like, why won't you just read 10 pages every day and learn it? And I was like, yeah, right, why not? And I think many times I have heard that people read the books like 4, 5, even 6 times. For the first attempts, I was like, oh, yeah, I have to do that too. And now I don't understand what's the point of it. I read books once, only once, and I made the flashcards, and at the same day, I learned them. So I didn't do flashcards that I never had the time to go through. So my advice would be that don't make anything you are never going to use. It's just waste of time. It's about 250 pages, the exam material, and I read 10 pages every day. And when I say to my friends that I'm reading 10 pages, they were like, what? 10 pages for law school exam? I was like, yeah, it's going to work. And I have to believe it, but it really does. And when the last week came, and I have studied 10 pages every day, and I have these retrieval practice days that I went through all the last week's material, I didn't have this huge panic, because I was like, okay, if I stop reading now, I know the 70% of it. There is no panic. I don't have to worry about it, because I'm probably going to do okay. I know most of it already. So if I never have time to read these last 10 pages, it doesn't really matter in the end.
It's not just about the learning science and the strategies and the time management. It's also about mindset and how you feel, and that has such a big impact on productivity.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it was so helpful because sometimes even if I felt calm, anxiety raise, of course, because it's hard and it's stressful. And when we talked and you advised me, and I remember when you said that, okay, think about a class and you pour water in the class when you study, and it's never going to be full. And it was very, because when I was reading, I was like, it's never going to be full, it's never going to be full. And because you don't have to aim for perfection, you have to aim for getting in. And it was very helpful this time because it relieved a lot of stress for me, knowing that I don't have to be perfect, I just have to do enough. And this sort of small advice is very useful, and it helps because, somebody can say something that comforts you at that moment, because even if you have your family and your friends, they maybe not understand quite completely.
Yeah, for sure. And I like that you brought up the one about the water in the glass. That's one that people often find helpful. So just to sort of underline what you were saying, for people listening, the metaphor I talk about is you've got a glass that you're trying to fill full of water, and that sort of represents progress towards preparing for your exams. And kind of often without thinking about it, like what people are instinctively trying to do is fill the glass all the way to the top, representing I am 100% prepared for this exam. But in a lot of cases, particularly when you get to a more advanced level of scholarship, beyond sort of more straightforward high school level exams, it becomes increasingly basically impossible to ever fill your glass to 100% perfect preparation for any given exam in the time available. So rather than kind of striving for that, you want to strive to get the level simply to the level it needs to be. 70% of the stuff 80% of the stuff whatever's a sort of a realistic level of preparation that ultimately gets you the result you're looking for, because you don't need 100% of the marks in the exam to succeed in your goals. You need 70% or 80% or whatever the mark is to achieve the goal you're looking for and the result you're looking for, whether it's a pass or a certain grade threshold in the exam. So I think that's often a really important one to bear in mind. And then what that means on a day-to-day basis is you focus your efforts each day on pouring as much extra water into the glass as possible. And your focus is on the progress and how much you're filling up the glass each day, rather than constantly worrying about how far the level of the water is from the top and how much you've still got to go and how much you still don't know. Just focus on making as much progress each day as possible. That's a really good one to remember. So look, you've shared so many useful little lessons you've learned along the way. I wonder if there were any other big lessons you've learned that we haven't covered today that you think would be helpful to share with people.
I think the most important thing was that after the third time I failed, I started to make notes that what went wrong and what was well. And I think that's very critical, because it's always a year for the next attempt, and you're going to forget your mistakes. And honestly, I know it can be very painful. It can be cruciating, like go through the test after you failed because it was your dream, you truly wanted it, and it really hurts to go through your test and see the mistakes that led you to the failure. But it's very important to go. And I never did this in high school, and I wish I had. And I started to do it after third failure, and I wish I have done it earlier, because I watched the test, and even during the reading process, I write down all the mistakes I have done, and I was thinking, okay, this was okay, and this wasn't okay. And after the test, the day after the test, I was like, okay, timing was off. This was well, I did this okay, this needs more work. I think that's the most important, because it really develops your ability, and you really start to think that where is the mistake? Like people usually say that, okay, I didn't read enough, and I use that excuse too. But I don't think that's usually the problem, because when I look at the statistics of the law school, 50% of the people say that they read 200 hours or more. Like, it's 3,000 people and 300 get in. So what did the rest of them do? Like, they did read enough, but they didn't get in. So the problem, it's not usually that I didn't read enough, I didn't do enough of work. You have to think, like, where's really the problem? Why you didn't read enough? Maybe you were scared because it was so hard. You didn't really feel like it, and you didn't really know how to read it. You have the wrong technique, you have the wrong strategy, you didn't space enough, you didn't recall it. You have to think, where is the real problem? Why you didn't read enough? Why you didn't get in? Not just, it's just a easy excuse. But if you truly want it, you have to do the work. You have to think, like, where are the mistakes? Even if it hurts a lot.
And that's something you've done so well throughout the whole process, throughout your whole academic journey, just finding where those opportunities are to improve your game, and look where it's got you. Such a fantastic result on such a competitive process as well. So many congratulations again. One thing I did want to ask you, Sanna-Mari, but because I know there are a lot of people in your shoes who listen to the podcast and hopefully find it very helpful, but don't get in touch to work with me, which is fine. Like, I try and share a lot on the podcast and be as helpful as I possibly can. But what are your thoughts on taking the step further and getting in touch to work together? Are you glad you took the extra step? And what would you say to anyone who's maybe in your shoes, who's perhaps been listening to the show for a long time and who's never really thought about doing coaching, or perhaps maybe thought it's not for them?
I'm very glad I did it. I first was a little bit afraid, because of course it's a different language and foreign and like this, and
yeah, I'm sorry, your English is so much better than my Finnish.
so I was a little bit nervous, but I was like, okay, this is my last try. If I don't make it this time, I'm never going to try. So it's all in now. And I was like, yeah, I need help. I cannot do this alone anymore, because it's very hard to fail every time. Like, you put all in and you fail, and it's not nice. And of course, the podcast has given me great advice. And but when I was talking with you, it's sort of it's more detailed, it's more specific, and you can kind of answer my questions, like the ones that I have been thinking and ones that I need the answer, because everybody has the different kind of problems and different kind of things to solve. So yeah, it was very useful, and I'm very glad I did it.
Excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure to help. And on which note, I always offer students that come on the Student Stories series the opportunity to ask any questions that we might be able to help you with in terms of your next steps. So you've obviously got your law course itself starting before too long. Is there anything we can help you with here today? Perhaps there's a question on your mind that may be helpful for other listeners listening as well. So yeah, do you have any questions we might be able to help you with today?
If there is a test that it's usually like 1,000 pages for one test, and you have months to treat, and it's obvious that you don't have to read everything, how do you learn to know what's important and what's not important? Of course, practice, but do you have any other advice?
Can you just describe what the reading is, like what sort of books or documents it is?
Let's say for example, it's criminal law. So it's very long law. And there is also like laws like don't do this, and if you do this, this punishes this. And it's sort of this. And then there is the words like reasonable. And then they explain, okay, that reasonable means in this law like this. Yeah. And there are 1,000 pages of this. And it's not all necessary to learn every crime, but perhaps the principles. Now I'm answering my own question, but principles. So if you have 1,000 pages of this, what would you do if you were a university student and you have to read 1,000 pages in 1 month, but you don't have to learn it all. And you have to just know what's important and what's not. Like, would you go to classes and listen very carefully, or perhaps ask, or how would you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things you've mentioned are already helpful. So, in the course of your classes or your lectures, your professors, your teachers will give some clues as to what they consider most important. You can always ask them. They might be able to guide you. And then another good thing is looking at the sorts of questions you might face. So normally you'll be offered some kind of sample test questions as part of the course. Sometimes just reading them through, not necessarily even answering them, but just read them through before you start your learning, can help give you a really good sense of, well, okay, these are the sorts of questions I'm going to get asked on this topic. So that kind of helps give your brain like a little bit of a filter, or kind of helps tune the antenna for what sort of information it's looking out for when you're reading through. And you can always kind of read at different paces, right? I sometimes talk about like the sort of T-shape model. It's quite a good sort of mental model to have in your mind. Like the cross of the T represents breadth. So it may be that you at least skim through everything, turning the pages relatively quickly and just kind of getting a sense, perhaps by reading the headings. And then whenever you get a sense that, oh, actually this bit might be a bit more important, you pause and you slow down and you read in more detail. Perhaps you grab your highlighter and eventually turn some of those key points into flashcards so you can learn them. And that kind of represents the vertical bit of the T. So you go broad, you at least skim through everything, searching for the bits that are important, less important. And then the vertical bit of the T is kind of the areas you decide look important. You go deeper on those. Another thing to just throw in is if you've kind of decided, well, okay, this bit's important, this bit's important, this bit's important, and your goal is to learn detail. We talked in the context of your most recent exam, like good way to learn detail is flashcards, the method you were using to pass your recent exams. You don't always have to do all your flashcards yourself. Like if there is an awful lot of material to get through, one good option can be to partner with people and say, okay, you make the flashcards on this part of the course, I'll make them on this part of the course, and then that kind of halves your workload in terms of the making process, and you can get through to the testing process more quickly.
This sounds very helpful. Yeah, sounds very good.
Well, that feels like a nice note to be thinking about bringing this to a close on. So I was wondering if I could, if I asked you, what's for some sort of kind of a closing tip for those listening today. I wondered if there's something you wish you'd known sooner that you know now.
My advice would be that there will always be people who criticize you, who have opinions, and some of them are very valuable and you should listen to them. But unfortunately, many of them are not, they don't make any sense and they are not reasonable, and you shouldn't listen to them. And I think the worst critic is usually yourself. And you should also think about, is it reasonable? Is it necessary? And just really think about it and make the changes if there is something to change. And if you have the sparkle to go for your dream, just do it, but find the right way to do it. Just don't want it. Just find the way to do it.
Who do I need to become to realize my dreams? What do I need to learn? What skills do I need to develop to get where I'm going? I think that's great advice. And I really like the point about, how you kind of manage critique and especially self-critique. I think that's a really insightful comment. On behalf of everybody listening, thank you so much for coming on the show to share a little bit of your experience. So many useful takeaways. Thank you, clearly for the thought you put into coming on along today. I'm really grateful for you giving up the time and being so open with your experiences. So thank you. From us all, wishing you every success with the next chapter. We'll be rooting for you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thanks again, Sanna Marie, and congratulations once again on such a fantastic achievement in your exams and landing the place you've been working for. There was so much practical stuff in today's episode. I just wanted to take a moment to unpack the 4 key takeaways I think that will be most helpful for many of you listening. Number 1, don't leave the real work of the testing to the end. The testing is the learning. You want to have a strategy to integrate that as you go along. Don't just leave it all to the end until you've finished making all the flashcards or whatever else you're doing in your studies. And by the way, if you've listened to today's episode and you didn't know what retrieval practice is, it simply means testing yourself. And that, more than any other one thing, is the key to getting stuff to stick in your memory. Number 2, you don't need 100% to pass. I'm guessing here, but like almost always, this is true. We don't need to know every single thing to be able to succeed in the exam. Beyond a certain level of learning, maybe you can do it kind of earlier in your high school career or whatever, it becomes increasingly difficult to memorize every single detail of your course to perfection. For Sanna Marie, as for many of you listening, it's just not a reasonable goal to have of yourself to know your entire course backwards. And in many cases, having that as your target can lead to a lot of unhelpful stress. You need enough to get the mark you want. And that often means you can get a big chunk of the exam wrong and still achieve that goal and get a really great result. So if you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself, this can be a really comforting thing to remember. Number 3, also quite comforting, particularly if things are not currently going your way, remember the lesson of Carol Dweck's influential work on growth mindset. And in particular, know that your ability, your talent is not fixed. You can level up and achieve more with consistency and the right approach. And finally, number 4, stay humble. Stay hungry to grow. You level up your skills and refine your strategy for getting to your goals. Listen, the best tennis players in the world show up at the practice court and work on their game and take advice from their peers and from their coach as they strive to be even better at their game. Same for the elite in any other sporting or non-sporting field you would care to mention. Sanna Marie demonstrated this so beautifully at multiple points in her academic journey. Remember first describing how she sought advice at school when things weren't quite working out as she wanted. That was when she learned about that growth mindset stuff. And then when she wasn't getting the results she wanted in her exams, looking for advice on learning strategy. And that's when she found this podcast and started to implement what she heard here, got some good results. And then finally getting a little one-on-one help from me to help her make the final tweaks and fine-tunings she needed to achieve her goals and get her that result she was looking for on the final attempt in such a competitive exam process. And if you would like to explore how I might be able to help you as your own exam success coach, to help you zero in on the right improvements to your study and exam taking strategy to score the marks you need the smart way, then please get in touch. Working with me one-on-one offers a winning blend of practical strategies, perfectly tailored to your unique circumstances and preferences, helping you learn faster, remember more, find good balance in your study routine, and work consistently, feeling calm and in control along the way. To learn more and book your free Zoom consultation with me, head to examstudyexpert.com/coaching. I look forward to talking soon. Next time, we'll be diving into the world of time management. I don't know about you, but there's never enough time to get everything done. But my guest next week, David Buck, has done research on the most common time management issues affecting students and had some really nice tips to share in next week's very actionable episode. So I hope you'll be able to join us then. For now, thank you so much once again for listening and wishing you every success in your studies.